let's bring in Michael Weiss, a columnist for Now Lebanon. He was in Aleppo last year. He's covered Syria extensively. Michael, does the involvement of al-Nusra and other groups make, while it makes a diplomatic solution all the more difficult, does it make it, in your opinion, impossible?
Well, I think not just the presence of Jabhat al-Nusra, but I think that the very nature of the conflict and the nature of the Assad regime makes it impossible. Look, al-Qaeda, their presence there is the result of the absence of any other kind of intercessory or intervening force in Syria on the side of the opposition. And many Syrian activists and civilians and rebels themselves had said, we're going back now a year, including in articles in the Wall Street Journal and so on, saying, look, we would prefer that NATO or the U.S. came to our aid. But if push comes to shove, and it's the guys with the long black beards who are willing to blow themselves up in order to take out a Mukhabarat checkpoint or a Syrian army checkpoint, we will unfortunately have to partner with them. Now, this is laying the seeds of a very dramatic and very dangerous conflict in the future, one that I would call the civil war within the civil war, because there are moderate forces in the Free Syrian Army headed by General Salim Idris, who is the U.S. designated or U.S. recognized FSA commander, and these guys are going to have to turn their guns against al-Qaeda. Now, this is a conflict that's already started in certain parts of the country, in the Aleppo countryside, even in parts of Damascus. This will be, if and when the Assad regime does fall, and that's a contingency that seems much remoter now than it did even weeks ago.
Yeah.
That is going to be, I think, that the major conflict that grips this country. Absolutely.
Well, when you talk about the Wall Street Journal, there's also a report in there at the weekend that really what decided the Obama regime in terms of arming the rebels was not so much the sarin gas, but also the presence of Hezbollah, obviously supporting Syria's Assad. Is this taking on something after the horse has bolted, trying to close the gate, when this has really gone beyond what is just taking place in Syria, but is, as some would argue, the end of the Sykes-Picot agreement of 100 years ago?
Well, indeed. I mean, you know, Sykes-Picot, if that does get unraveled, it will be happening in the eastern part of Syria where the jihadis tend to be, you know, strongest in number. I mean, look, I think what we're seeing here is a coordinated effort, not just on the part of the United States, but particularly Britain, France, and most importantly, and this is something I wish the media were paying more attention to, Saudi Arabia has now essentially got the keys to the car when it comes to the Syrian opposition. Hezbollah's presence in Syria was taken very, very personally by the Saudi royal family, and they are now coordinating almost directly with the French to the point that I think the United States is almost a marginal player in this conflict. Indeed, when President Obama himself didn't even acknowledge that we were going to arm the rebels. He had one of his communications aides do that on a press conference. Salim Idris wasn't even made aware that this was the new U.S. policy decision. He was only told it by the French and the Saudis. So look, Saudi Arabia's role here, I think, will be key in the coming weeks and months. All
right, you know, and presumably Qatar as well, and those say they're supportive of al-Nusra's efforts in the region, allegations that may prove false. Yeah. But either way, let me ask you, is there a viable solution at all on the horizon, and does the election of what is considered to be a more moderate conservative Iranian president change anything?
On the question of Syria, no. If you look at the president-elect of Iran, he's given comments to Press TV and other Iranian regime-controlled outlets saying that, you know, the conflict in Syria, the Syrian uprising going back 2 years was a Zionist plot. And, I mean, you're seeing the same kind of messaging that's come from, it's not even the sort of political class in Iran, it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And, I mean, look, Iran's policy in Syria is very, very clear. They are inheriting the role of the Syrian regime. This is no longer becoming a conventional military conflict run by the Syrian army. This is now becoming a sectarian militia-run conflict, headed by Hezbollah on the one hand, but also joined by a consortium of mainly Shia and Alawite sectarian militias that are being trained and financed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. A lot of these fighters, by the way, they come from Iraq, they come from Lebanon, they come from Gulf countries. They're being flown to Tehran to get special... Is there a solution to this? No, I'm afraid there's not. I think that the fighting in Syria, whatever happens, if Assad hangs on, if he falls, this is a conflict that's going to go on for years, if not decades. And I'm sorry to say, there is no diplomatic solution to it. If there's a military solution to it, this is something that's years on at this point.
On that pessimistic note, we must leave it there. Michael Weiss in New York, thank you, though, for joining us with your insight.
Thank you very much.